Is the mic on? Yeah, there we go. Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order. First, we'll do a pledge of the flag. If we could all rise. Face the flag. Put your hand over your heart. Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call.
Councilmember Franklin?
Here.
Councilmember Tarnay?
Here.
Councilmember Sherillian?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lesser?
Here.
Mayor Haworth?
Here. Okay, if we could have an approval of the agenda and just a quick, announcement. We are basically doing this meeting as a study session for the capital improvement project budget. So just so folks know, it's been moved by Councilmember Franklin and seconded by Councilmember Tarnay. Okay.
Councilmember Tarnay? Motion passes 5-0.
Great. All right. Are there any public comments here in chambers regarding the budget or the agenda? I see none. How about on Zoom?
No request on Zoom.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to close public comment, and we're going to get going. I assume that Director Lee will be presenting this. And I also assumed, and just checking for understanding, I brought my notebook from last week that has the CIP budget in it, and that's where we're going to start, I would assume.
Yes.
How about that? Okay, thank you.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. Eric Lee, your Public Works Director. The Public Works Department is very pleased to be presenting our proposed 5-year update to the CIP to you today. And I wanted to also note that it is National Public Works Week, so it's very appropriate that we're doing it at this time. Our teams worked extensively to get this draft plan to you that we hope meets your expectation. Of course, we're going to be taking notes and willing to make changes as you direct. To start off, Acting City Engineer Gil Gamboa is going to give a brief presentation highlighting what the plan is and why we think this is a good plan. And then, of course, we're ready to have a discussion with you about that.
Great. And Gil, before you make your comments, just to recap, of course, this is also on the agenda for the meeting later tonight. So my hope is that in 2 hours, or maybe slightly less, we can get through this with our questions. So I want to be very, I don't want to rush us through, but efficient with our questions. And, I assume, I'll ask after the presentation what would be most helpful to staff. But let's all think about it in those terms, that we will be seeing this again, but it won't be the full presentation, but we could give more direction than if we desire to. Is that understood? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Please.
All right. Good evening, Mayor Haworth and council members. My name is Gilbert Gamboa. I'm the acting city engineer for the city's Public Works Department. And tonight, we're going to walk through the proposed 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal years 2026 through 2030. This plan reflects the city's continued commitment to investing in critical infrastructure, community amenities, and long-term sustainability. So before I start, I want to take a minute to acknowledge and thank the engineering division, management analysts, and project managers for their hard work in compiling the CIP, and more importantly, for their work executing the CIP projects. I would also like to thank the finance department for their assistance in preparing the CIP. The CIP was developed to meet regulatory and grant deadlines, which take precedent first and foremost, assess community needs and priorities aligned with strategic goals outlined in the city's council's work plan, and evaluate financial impacts. The most common factors taken into consideration in making priority decisions include urgency, community impact, economic benefit, feasibility, sustainability, and asset preservation. We also balance priorities by ensuring regulatory compliance, including state and federal mandates, and reinforcing, most importantly, public health and safety. So having competing priorities is challenging at best, but staff has shown that we are prepared to come together and, when needed, to pivot on the immediate needs and/or emergency needs. So the CIP approval process runs in parallel with the city's proposed operating budget timeline. So as shown in this timeline, the proposed CIP was reviewed by the Planning Commission on April 23rd, followed by the Parking and Public Improvements Commission, or PPIC, on April 24th. The CIP will be targeted for adoption on June 3rd as part of the city's budget process. So before we dive into future projects, I want to highlight a few accomplishments from the past year. So the city held ribbon-cutting ceremonies for the Ceramic Studio Kill renovation project, the Jocelyn Community Center crosswalk improvements, the Polywog Park Fitness Station, and just last week, we cut the ribbon on the new pier railings replacement project. City staff also came together as a team and adapted to meet immediate parking needs as we approach the completion of interim parking lot 3, just in time for the summer season. So a 5-year snapshot we have for the fiscal 26 through 30 CIP represents an investment of over $188 million across 10 major funding sources. We have $93.3 million previously appropriated. We have $28.5 million is being requested for fiscal year 26, and $66.9 million is projected over the next 4 years. So key strategic priorities include modernization of aging city facilities infrastructure, enhancing ADA accessibility and public safety improvements, expanded investment in outdoor spaces and environmental sustainability, and the execution of long-term upgrades to our core water, sewer, and storm drain systems. So I want to talk a little bit about the project funding overview. So the next 2 slides summarize the city's 10 major funding categories. So each funding category has strict eligibility criteria, and many projects must align with those specific funding requirements. We've worked closely with finance to ensure all projected funding allocations are realistic given the current revenue limitations. So the 10 funding categories include the CIP fund, our right-of-way fund, for example, streets, sidewalk, and other right-of-way related projects, parking and state pier related, grants and outside funding. We also have Measure W and our street lighting and landscape fund, and our core water, sewer, and storm drain enterprise funds. And as a quick reminder, the CIP is our planning document. Figures beyond 2026 are preliminary projections. They help us forecast future needs, but actual budgets will be reinforced annually or be refined annually as priorities and funding sources become clearer. As individual projects are brought before the City Council, various phases of their project life, the full financial view is typically included as a budget and expenditure summary attachment in the respective staff report. The CIP is our best foot forward at planning for the future. So in terms of funding and revenue sources, how they really break down, this slide represents a breakdown of funding types with internal and external sources. So internal sources include the CIP and enterprise funds. External sources include local returns, special funds, and grant sources. The CIP fund provides the most flexibility for project funding. So this snapshot of the new project additions for the fiscal 26 through 30 CIP, they are net new projects and not a continuation of existing project. As shown here, the majority of the new project line items have been added to the right-of-way and CIP funding categories. So pausing here just for a quick friendly reminder. So in your staff report, you will have 3 attachments, a schedule listing of the capital improvement projects by fund. Also included in the staff report are the CIP project summary sheet for each project by fund. And then lastly, included in the staff report is an attachment of the proposed line item modifications by fund. So instead of reviewing each project line by line, I will summarize the various funding categories in the remaining slides. And then please note that projects shown in the red font represent new additions to the CIP plan. So beginning with the CIP fund, it has 38 projects totaling approximately $27.7 million. And the CIP fund supports a wide range of general capital projects that do not fall under more specialized funding streams. These include parks, public facilities, and non-grant eligible initiatives. Many of these are either in the planning, design phase, or about to begin construction, or others have annual allocations. Some, and like I said in red, are the new projects added. So we have the Man Village Aquatic Pool Complex. We have an allocation for the school district, for school district projects. Police and fire facilities for some exterior painting, the Voter Center ADA improvements, and a quick update on the Senior and Scout Community Center renovation. We're waiting 100% submittal from the Friends of the Scouts, and then once we have the submittal slated for a little bit later in June, then we will conduct a peer review, and also we'll enter into a formal plan check with our building and safety division. And then we estimate by the end of 2025 here, we will have that process complete, and then we'll be able to move into to talk a little bit about the projected estimate at that time, and then funding, advertising, and bidding likely in 2026. So likely we'll probably reach a pre-construction and then construction phase towards the end of 2026 and into 2027.
For the Scout House specifically.
For the Scout House. This is for the Senior and Scout House
Yeah,
Community Center renovation. So some other new projects. We have an annual street resurfacing program. Part of that funding, we've found that this is the first year we've had to supplement our street projects by adding some supplemental funding in the CIP fund. We have in Pollywog Park, we have a wooden pedestrian bridge replacement project. Some focus on the outdoor dining, hopefully in time for the Olympics, and then the newest addition with the purchase of the property at 400 Man Beach Boulevard. That is also a new project that's being funded through the CIP.
Could I ask a question
Sure.
now? My colleagues, hopefully it doesn't. So I understand the items in red are new, additions. But this list doesn't tell us which projects have already started or have money spent. That's where we're going to get to in the next charts, et cetera, or in the actual budget.
Well, the projects in blue are the carryover funds that already have funded.
They're funds, but
funded, and they're in various stages where there's planning,
Okay.
Design, or
Okay.
construction on that
All right.
end of it. So they were previously appropriated through previous
They were
CIP.
appropriated, right. The funds were,
Appropriated,
I understand the funds were appropriated. Okay.
Hey, Gil, quick question too. These are not prioritized whatsoever. This is-
Correct. This is just a listing. It's not a random order, but it's not in
Thank
prioritization
you.
Right.
order.
And that is some stuff that we could get into later in terms of
Perfect.
priority and directions. Thank you.
Just, so these 38 equal 27,685,000.
I'll go back. Correct. So the CIP fund has got 38 projects and about 27.7 million
Okay.
on that.
Great.
And so these are all the building, park facility, repairs, improvements, master plan, streetscapes, all the types of funding that we need that aren't enterprise funds or specific grants or things of that nature. Okay, next, we have our streets, sidewalks, and right-of-way funds. So here we have 28 projects totaling about 51.5 million. The street and sidewalks right-of-way fund is dedicated to street sidewalk rehabilitation, ADA ramps, pavement management, traffic signals, and pedestrian safety enhancements. So these projects are typically funded by our four major local return sources, including gas tax, Measure M, Measure R, and Prop C. So some of the new projects that entered this group include the ADA ramps. These are our CDBG, or non-CDBG funding ramps. And then Aviation Boulevard and 33rd, we're closing a gap on a missing sidewalk. This is over by REI. Citywide cross gutter improvements. We have Man Beach Boulevard pavement rehab is in this group. pedestrian curb ramp improvements at Valley Drive, Elm, and Walnut Avenues, sidewalk installation across Veterans Parkway at 6th and 10th Street. We have a temporary mock-up there right now, but looking to get some concrete sidewalk in that place. And the Voter Center ADA improvements. So next is our parking fund. It has 7 projects at a total of approximately $8.7 million. So the parking infrastructure remains a priority, with investments starting every 10, 15 years, it's time to take a look at the structural condition of the pier. Grants and other outside funds, we got 10 projects here totaling $6.9 million. So the grant and other outside funds supports the projects co-funded through federal, state, and regional or private grants. It prioritizes ADA improvements, sustainability, and matching funds for local and regional partnerships. And here we have some storm drain projects, curb ramps, and other city-owned facilities and infrastructure, street improvement projects that we need done that end of it. Moving on, we have the Measure W fund. So this has 5 projects at a total of approximately $31.7 million. The Measure W fund invests in regional and municipal storm water management, green infrastructure, and compliance with state water quality mandates. A highlight here is the 28th Street Stormwater Infiltration Project, which most of the funding here, and that's over near 26th, 27th, Bruce's Beach, and the lifeguard parking lots. That's an infiltration project on that. Now we're going into some of our core projects. So our storm drain fund, we have 11 projects at a total of approximately $7.3 million. The storm drain fund targets rainfall conveyance infrastructure upgrades and NPDES compliance, emphasizing localized flooding solutions and long-term resilience. And here we have a couple of Dominguez channels, our TMDL project for a large majority of our stormwater drains, obviously, to the Santa Monica Bay. But there is a small portion that drains over to the Dominguez channel, so we're looking to take care of that here with one of the new projects. American Martyrs, the stormwater sump there, they've approached us, so we're putting a little bit of money away to do a hydrology and capacity study there as well.
Hey, Gail, quick question.
Yes.
The $500,000 that is being asked to move from the general fund to the storm drain fund is to fund what project?
That one, I think it's going to the TMDL for the Dominguez channel
Thank you.
on that end of it.
Thank you.
And then moving on to the next, we got a street lighting and landscape fund. Has an annual allocation for city street light and street light maintenance. So that one's pretty straightforward. Our next sewer fund, we got 9 projects at a total of approximately $30 million. So the sewer fund is funded by sewer enterprise revenue. This category supports sanitary sewer, lift station modernization, annual mainline replacements, master planning, and system reliability improvements. So in years past, our focus has been mainline pipeline replacements, which we're continuing, but right now we're moving into a time frame where we have, out of our 8 lift stations, we have 6 of them located in the public right-of-way that we need to attend to. We have 3 of the three, Voorhees, Pacific, and Poinsettia, that are our first little group that we're going to switch over to our lift stations. These are important because they're low points in our system that pumps our wastewater up to where we can achieve gravity flow and then meet up with the LA counties.
Very
Supply.
important.
It is. Here we look to flush with no fear, so.
Flush with no fear, wow.
So,
A window into your world.
all right, moving on to our beloved water fund. We have 13 projects at $24 million. The water fund remains the priority and supports enterprise-funded water system enhancements, including major booster pump station upgrades, annual reliability-focused capital improvements. And again, we're switching gears here from mainline pipe into much-needed facilities like pump stations, the reservoir we completed a while back on that end of it. So that's a focus on the water fund. We do have a new project that's going to study the reclaim or recycled water feasibility for some of our medians, so we can look to water them in a different way. A lot of the other funds are carryovers from previous years, so we're in either planning, design, or construction phases on those.
Okay.
So just recapping the 10 funding categories, the CIP plan is anchored with targeted investments that include about $52 million dedicated to street, sidewalk, and right-of-way improvements, enhancing mobility and public access. We've got nearly $62 million in utility infrastructure, reinforcing long-term system reliability and resilience, grant-funded and ADA-focused projects, prioritized to leverage external resources and advance accessibility. Measure W funded stormwater initiative, aligning the regional water quality goals and mandates and sustainability. Strategic upgrades to parking and pier facilities, preserving high-use assets and protecting vital revenue streams. So that kind of brings us to the end of the CIP snapshot presentation. Staff recommends that the City Council receive the presentation, provide any feedback and direction for revisions, and consider approving the proposed 5-year CIP project list for inclusion along with the fiscal year 2026 budget.
Okay, thank you so much.
So I'm here for questions, and so is, along with Director Lee and our staff.
Okay, so I see Councilmember Lesser pressed a button, but I just want to turn to our colleague, Councilmember Franklin, because you were about to say something. I said, hold on, we're getting to questions, so if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Okay, so thank you very much for the presentation. And so that's a total of 108 million. So what numbers are we going to play on the lotto to win that money?
It's actually 188, isn't it?
But I say that facetiously, but I just want residents who may be listening in to know that, that's the total that we identify right now. We don't have it all, but we've got a plan for it. So they are very real projects and very real numbers, so appreciate that. But just back on the recycled water feasibility study for MBB medians and Highland Avenue tree wells, did we at one point, maybe a couple of years ago, talk about, desert landscaping for the medians at all, and just eliminating the need at all to water other than trees?
That's in play as well.
Is it?
The study is if we do need to provide, obviously, some, I think almost everything needs to get watered a little bit, but if we can extend the reclaimed water system that's out there to these medians, if that's feasible, but landscaping with desert, California native plants is part of that project too.
Yeah, okay. Because it's primarily what, Manhattan Beach Boulevard, Marine Avenue,
Correct, and
parts of...
Roseberry.
This came about during the low point of the most recent drought that we had.
Yes.
And we had turned off the irrigation. We got direction from council to study bringing the recycled water across the street from Pollywog. And so this is to follow up on that direction. And then once we know what water source we have, we can decide how it's going to be landscaped, whether it's going to be natives or it's going to be turf the way it is. And then also what we want to fold into is the trees on Highland in North Manhattan Beach, also potential to water them with the recycled as well. So it's some synergy with these projects.
But it's only on Manhattan Beach Boulevard because it's taking it from the Pollywog where there's already recycled water.
That's the idea, and that's where we have all those turf medians.
Right.
Once we get back into state mandated drought restrictions, we're going to have to turn the water off.
Okay,
Okay, great, thank you.
all right. Councilmember Lesser.
I have specific project-related questions, but maybe I want to ask an overview question, which was hinted at by Councilmember Sherillian's earlier question. And that is, to what extent in this workshop before our regular meeting, are you presenting trade-offs that council needs to make, what we might want to prioritize, one project or another, or are you simply seeking questions about projects and basically approving the judgments that staff made based on prioritization, where funds are available, in terms of what projects go first and what order? And maybe I either address you, Gil, or address anybody else.
It's the latter. So we would love for you to give us some direction to finalize the list. We think that this is in conformance with what we heard from the council and the community over the last year. That said, it certainly is the council's prerogative to accelerate projects, decelerate some other projects.
So I think what would be helpful for me is, are there some choices within these different funds where you've heard from the community, this project is prioritized, but so are others, which would need to be funded by that fund? If so, I'd be grateful if you'd highlight that, unless you think staff has enough clear direction.
Well, I don't think we have any direction yet. So I'm certainly looking for that feedback. I mean, as it relates to the schedule that Gil was mentioning, really this is where we programmed the proposal for dollars. And the prior year appropriations totaled $93 million of already green-lighted projects, so to speak. And we're asking for another $28 million to either continue those or start new ones. And we think this reflects where the council has asked us to go with the planning process. For example, 400 MBB is a new project that's on there. It obviously reflects the new acquisition of that property. We have set aside $2 million to do something with that. It's certainly not going to be enough, more than likely to do ultimately what the community wants, but we got some seed money there. Conversely, we've had a camera project in the CIP for many years, and that's we've slowed that one down, trading off some of those dollars to reflect what we think is where the council wants to go. And so there are those, that is reflected in the thought process here, although it might not be abundantly clear in the presentation.
Okay, hopefully just then some quick questions about projects, and then we as a council can talk about the larger issue of prioritization. First, I wanted to thank for the summary of the timeline on the Scout House and Communities Center. I think it'd be helpful just to mention it in passing tonight when we do a redo of this, at least a high-level summary, because I've been asked about the timeline by a number of residents. It'd be helpful to provide it. Next, with regard to the Metlocks escalator replacement line item, which is mentioned for at least two funds, I thought council direction was to assess the feasibility of an elevator as opposed to just adding escalators, or is that what this item encompasses, even though it's in shorthand just referred to the escalator replacement project?
Exactly. So we are exploring getting out of the escalator business and adding another elevator in that area and a staircase.
Perfect. Next, with regard to the BEG pool funding, I just wanted to make sure there's sufficient funding there for what we can anticipate will be emergencies, failures as we head into the summer. Historically, this 80-how-many-year-old pool has faced challenges, and I just wanted to make sure there's sufficient resources to at least address them.
Yes, so there's over $800,000 is available now, and what we're proposing is, if you remember, this was originally called the BEG Pool Aquatic Center renovation. This is really just to have some funds available to take care of significant maintenance issues. And based on the projects we're aware of right now that are on deck, the $800,000 that's currently available would be enough for us to move forward and make sure we're dealing with critical plumbing and decking issues and fencing
Great.
issues.
Also to clarify, there's a reference to the sports court at Marine Park that has, of course, not yet been decided by council. So we, as a council, can, with public input, can direct that goes to some other project, but staff is just simply putting funds aside should this council decide to so direct. Is that right?
I think you're referring to the pay and play item.
Pay and play, former pay and play.
Correct. So there's a project that we know the community wants to do there. We have not got direction of what that is, but we're anticipating something.
Great. Finally, with regard to the lighting fund, I just wanted to confirm. I can recall from years ago when we originally purchased our lights in the city from Edison, that there were representations about how we would add greater efficiencies to those lights, and as a result, they might be cost producers, particularly if we could lease them out for different types of, I'm not going to say Wi-Fi, but some sort of area network of some kind, and also install more efficient lighting. How does this number reflect that? Is there further study required to be able to ensure that we're not at such a loss with our lighting fund?
I don't see it on,
It was the one that was, quote, the easiest, that was referenced very quickly.
The street lighting and landscaping fund was that 375 over the
Yep.
5 years?
Yep.
oh, okay.
So, yeah, so it costs us more to operate and maintain the lights than we have collected in the assessment district. And my understanding was when the city procured those lights from Edison, there was a desire, anticipation to lease to the telecoms for
Yeah.
space on top of the poles and have lease revenue. And this would also be, there'd be a synergy with what then was the fiber to the premise project, of which the city did not move forward with. And so because we don't have the lease revenue or any synergy with a fiber project, this has been an expense for the city rather than a revenue source.
Most efficient lighting bulbs are already installed? So
Yes,
have we realized any
they're-
savings that we might?
Correct. They're LEDs essentially.
Thank you.
Thank you for
You're
those
welcome.
questions. Those are good questions. Not that I'm judging your questions. Go ahead, Councilmember Shirley.
Thank you. I'm going to tread lightly into the pond. I've got some questions, and I'm going to circle back with more questions. But first and foremost, Gil, great job on the presentation. Thank you for the high-level summary, and thank you for getting Peck Reservoir up and running, and especially the water treatment. I think we're still okay, right, Mayor Howard?
Yep.
Okay. With that said, you mentioned the $95 million in prior year appropriations. You have $188 million of a 5-year or a plan of CIPs. Most focusing on the CIP itself and not the other funds just yet. Help me better understand how the CIP implementation works. You got $7 million in the CIP, and then all funds, you got millions more. How does the implementation work to get that done in a single year? How do you prioritize? You're going to get some priorities from us. And sidebar there for a second with that, but I want to also thank you guys for listening to the public. We heard back from the public. What was priority to them was public safety, streets and sidewalks, and parks, and you've answered that here to me, so I appreciate that. Their voices are being heard when it comes to the CIP, but maybe walk me through how you prioritize and how you're going to get done $7.5 million in the CIP. In addition, you got another $5 million to carry forward in the CIP fund, but a total of $95 million for all funds from prior years. And then how do you get that done, and how can we help?
Well, thank you for the question. This council and this community really has been very pro reinvestment into our infrastructure, and that's been reflected as it relates to your question, I think most largely in previous years of adding staff in our engineering group to work on these projects. And so, frankly, we need people sitting in chairs and then ability to get out in a truck and put a hard hat on and make sure these things keep moving. There's been a number of positions that were authorized over the last few years, and I think once we have a few vacancies right now. Once we can get those vacancies filled, we'll be able to continue to move forward. In the meantime, we are contracting with private firms for consultant project management services to make sure that certainly the priority projects, whether it be from a regulatory deadline perspective or a grant deadline or just the urgent needs of the community, those types of projects are moving forward as quickly as possible. Example of that would be our 28th Street infiltration project. We don't have any time to waste on that, and so we're bringing on consultant project managers to help in the interim while we're staffing up on the staff side. Similarly, the Scout House, that is community priority. And we're working in tandem with our partners, with the Friends of the Scout House and the Tomorrow Group to get that completed. And so, yes, there's a plethora of projects that we're working on. Some of them are more important than others for various reasons. And we're able to, with whether there's staffing changes or other curveballs that are thrown at us, able to adapt and be agile while keeping focus on the main thing. Does that answer your question?
For the most part, do you have enough funds placed in the budget for this year? Because you mentioned you have some vacancies to get these projects where they need to be.
We do. As mentioned in our opener on the operating side, we had originally proposed a senior civil engineer and an associate engineer, and that didn't make the cut that's being proposed to you. And largely, we took that off the table because we got vacancies right now. And if we can get to fully staffed and we have the ability to tackle more projects, we will certainly work with finance and the city manager to contemplate additional resources if necessary. But we think we have got a good plan to move this forward right now.
Great, and I'll pass it along. Just one quick question. I want to also emphasize, as Mayor Pro Tem mentioned, about the Scout House, and there's all kinds of rumbles in the community as to where this is going. I know you mentioned you get fiscal year 2026, but is there anything we can do to expedite that timeline? Is that something you could bring back to council that we could interject to help move it along? Because I don't want it to turn into another Sepulveda Bridge. And I don't want to, we've been talking about it for 5 or 6 years, and we need something to move this along. I mean, it's not acceptable to have fiscal year 26 and then 4 years to build, and we're at 2030, and it's a 10-year project. So can you please just a little bit, I know you've already mentioned it, but.
Yeah, so I would say that what we really need the council available to catch the fly ball when we hit it to you about we're likely to have costs that are going to be more than has been already anticipated, and we're going to have a gap that we need to fill. And so, making the time to have some very explicit conversations about that, I think that's what we need right now, or we're going to need
Or
from
will
next from you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll defer
Are
later.
you sure? You're
Yes,
good?
oh yeah,
Okay.
for now.
We're pressing buttons.
Pressing buttons.
I did.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
didn't
I thought we
bring
were
them.
just.
Well, we did the last
raising
time, but
hands. Okay.
I had pressed my button.
Okay.
But
No,
you go
I'll-
ahead.
no,
I'm the
no.
mayor. Go ahead.
So I'll withdraw my button then. So one of the priorities that I've had, just because of the time constraint, is just being prepared for the Olympics and World Cup that's coming up. And I just want to make sure that we have the funds necessary to accommodate the crowds that are going to be coming, and then also explore micromobility so that we can get cars off the street. Where does that fit into what we have planned for the more immediate future?
So I think there's going to be a variety of programs that are going to have to wrap around those community needs that are coming. As it relates to the CIP, we've added 2 projects that really were an outcome from the outdoor dining process, one being the flex spaces. And so we've got $1 million programmed in year 2 of the CIP to, not sure exactly what that's going to be, but we've got funds for that. And then a little later, much later in the CIP, in year 5, sidewalk widening. We've got $1 million earmarked to start that endeavor. But I think that what you're referring to is also there's operational needs and some other non-capital needs that we're going to have to be tackling as a team.
And then as far as for the capital needs, I think, from my understanding that there are funds available through that are going to be made available to address these changes, right? And maybe we can have kind of a greater emphasis or somebody really dedicated to look into what grants are available. Because
For what?
For just improving our roads and from Measure M, that's what I'm hearing.
Yeah,
We
we
already-
do have
we were-
Measure M allocations already programmed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And frankly, we've got them exhausted
Yeah.
in the plan.
I think what you're, I think I know where you're going with this, because you were talking about micromobility, and then you talked about first mile, last mile, or one talks about. There are a lot of different opportunities. There's local grants from Metro that could be used for first mile, last mile. There's different plans, like the micromobility piece may be a policy decision that we as council say we want more X, Y, and Z, and then they adapt a capital improvement plan that incorporates that.
Okay.
So that would be, that's how I would see that, and, you know.
Okay,
And-
thank
and-
you.
And I'll just add that staff is working on bringing that back to council per the council's request, and that would include a funding discussion as well.
Okay, thank you.
Great. Okay. See if I can remember what I was going to say. So when I was, and if you look at the schedule of the capital improvement projects, and it's by fund, right? So you have your CIP fund, which is park improvements and facility renovations, and includes a lot of those things, which I think Councilmember Shirley, you rightly mentioned, that the public really wants, park improvements, et cetera. But when you look at these schedules and you see some of the projects have 0 this year or a lot this year, that's how you can kind of see either what's sort of in process or what's a priority. Is that a correct assessment?
That is, yes.
Okay. So if there's stuff in here that has like 0, 0, 0, I mean, we're not spending money on that now, but we could also, we can play with this a bit. Here's my question to you. If we say, gosh, we don't want to fund the school district project, would you be able, and I'm using this as an example, would you be able to say, well, Mayor, we've already started that, and we spent money on that, so we can't stop that. Like, that's the kind of stuff we want to know if we can do, right? So if we want to say, well, we really want to do this instead, would you tell us, well, we've already, allocated, we've already started, not if we have funding, but we've started the work on it. So would you be able to tell us that kind of?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
so that's a great example of feedback that we would love to hear.
Right,
And
because
then-
that's what's hard to tell.
Understood. And so I think to the extent that you can communicate what you would rather see,
Right.
I think that would be helpful for us.
Okay, great. And by the way, I now understand this. Yeah, it's taken me 13, 14 years. No, but it's a plan, you said it well at the beginning, either you or Gilbert Gamboa, that it's a planning document, right? And so that is very helpful. And as, Councilmember Franklin brought up, it's a lot of money. And we're not spending money we don't have, right? It's money that is either coming to us from federal tax measures, federal grants, state, measure, all these things that we can only be spent on this stuff.
Correct. And just to add, by fund, like you suggested, like our gas tax money or our Measure M money. But the CIP fund specifically, there's $27 million worth of projects over the next 5 years. And that's, essentially it's all funded by the general fund. And there's high degrees of discretion that the council has on how that $27 million
That $27 million.
can be spent.
Right.
And similarly, on the water infrastructure, we can only spend it on water projects. But if you'd rather see a water project like this instead of that,
Right.
that's something we could talk about.
Great.
We could tell you the pros and cons of making a trade-off like that.
Great. So I just, and it's, also I wanted to point out, and correct me if I'm wrong, so the recent sales tax increase, local sales tax increase, the reason that's not in here is that goes to the general fund because we could not designate it or earmark it as such. So our recent local sales tax, anybody?
I think Acting Finance Director Brett Hauer has the best answer to that question.
I mean, I think I gave the best answer.
That's confirmation.
Okay. She said humbly with a smile, yes.
Yes, hello. Acting Finance Director Libby Bretthauer. Just here to confirm what you just stated, that currently the Measure MMB sales tax measure funds are budgeted as a revenue source in the general fund because it was done as a general tax measure. And then a transfer from the general fund to the CIP fund is scheduled every year.
Right.
Because it was something we discussed with the finance subcommittee, and as of right now, that is written into the budget document as a funding measure for the CIP fund. But as Public Works Director Lee mentioned, you do have a high degree of discretion on how you allocate those funds, and we are certainly open to taking any questions and coming back with alternatives if you'd like to discuss it.
Thank you. And I'm not suggesting we do anything differently with that. I think that those of us who are on council, said this is what we're passing for. And I think our recently elected said, no, this is going to infrastructure. So, but just to confirm why we don't see that in a funding source here. So my last question, let's see, sales tax revenue. It says revenue, not revenge. The school district project. I couldn't read my writing for a second. Where I can't find it now. Oh, it was at the top of one of those lists. Tell me a little bit more about that. Is it, has it been identified? Is there a cost? And is that a contractual obligation?
Yes, we've got a shared use agreement with the district for a variety of funding mechanisms. One of those is they can request an allocation as part of the annual CIP process. So this is the request. We're not obligated to fund any of these requests. We're not obligated to fund it at this amount. But I would say in the last many years, the city council has funded $250,000 per year.
Okay.
And what they're asking for this year is funding to support repaving of parking lots and blacktop at schools that are not going to be touched by our next slurry seal project.
Thank you. Okay, great.
Also, tennis lights, right?
Separate request, Nexus with the same agreement, yes.
Okay.
The
Nexus same
Maricoastal
agreement.
lights.
Okay, Councilmember Franklin, you're up.
Yes. So let's just, we had the vote for Measure MMB. It's going to generate approximately 5 something million.
Nine.
5.9, okay, so $6 million. Can you just give a little color to this on how that's going to impact the CIP budgets of years past? The difference it'll make, I mean, in terms of getting that $6 million in now, and, years past, I remember seeing these modest numbers that would transfer over, but how much of a game changer is it for us?
Yeah, in recent years, I think the city was transferring about $1 to $2 million per year into the CIP based on a variety of funding policies. And so the $5 million is a terrific upgrade and much needed investment in the community's infrastructure.
So they'll see things being fixed and replaced and repaired and enhanced and everything like that much more quickly.
Yes,
More
in theory, it depends how those dollars are ultimately spent. I mean, for example, if that $5 million per year, almost $6 million per year, was all spent on one $50 million project, the results that you were alluding to might not be felt in the same way,
Right.
but it would certainly be going back into the community.
And can that money be bonded? In other words, can it be allocated so we can go out for a bond and then use that money to pay the bond?
I believe so. I think our acting finance director can confirm.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to add too that although we're transferring $5 million a year into the CIP fund, we're not currently allocating that all to projects. So we are putting some into a reserve for future projects or future debt service if that is decided at some point.
But they all have a CIP focus.
Oh, yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Based on our policy direction. Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Great. Okay. I just wanted to make that clear for people who
Yes.
can't, to figure out what they're paying for.
Yeah, and again, you have the discretion to make those decisions, and but we wanted to, since that was the general direction as we understood it to date, we're again identifying that as a transfer to the CIP fund to kind of have those funds spoken for, but we're not immediately tying it all up in projects identified in the CIP plan. We're just setting some aside for future allocations.
Okay, great. And going back, the street sidewalks and right-of-way funds, the MBB pavement rehabilitation from Sepulveda to Dianthus Street, is that being worked on now, or is that like in the foreseeable future as the pavement deteriorates day by day, or?
That's something that's we're working on now, and so acting city engineer Gil Gamboa can confirm.
Yeah, so we're currently in the design phase on that. We've done some surveying there for ADA ramps. We've done some corings for the pavement itself. So it's in we call the design phase on that end of it, along with a couple other streets near the Peck Reservoir. So that'll be in the next cycle of street improvement.
Approximately what?
Approximately, we'll probably get to a point where we'll be able to finish up design by the end of this calendar year, and then look to 2026 to implement that project.
Okay.
In terms of advertising, bidding, and construction, and try to time it, around the school district, school schedule and things like that.
Is there any reason why, it's so unusual that set of streets just deteriorated like almost instantly, or it seemed like overnight? Is that?
Well, so the
it's
last.
a hill and.
Correct. Yeah, it gets its share of heavy traffic with buses, trash trucks, and then everybody coming into the city and leaving, in the morning on that end of it.
Okay.
Yes, there are grade issues when you come down and, you break down before you get to the bottom, you're able to slow down and things like that. It was last paved in 2009.
Really?
And we grinded and overlaid it, but if you look at the historical nature, it's coming to a point where we need to actually replace the entire structural section. So I think that's what's adding up to right now.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I'm trying to picture number 26 on that same list of sidewalks. Sidewalk installation across Veterans Parkway at 6th and 10th. I know didn't we just repaint as part of traffic mitigation?
So that's a temporary treatment right now until we can get to our citywide concrete projects, which we'll put in the sidewalk. So that will be later on at the end of this fiscal year, or this calendar year.
So you'll cut into the grass, the existing curb?
No.
Not cutting the grass, just what we see out there is the alignment and the width of it, so you can see, that gives you kind of a frame of where the sidewalk will be.
All right, great, thank you. And it also says voter center ADA improvements. So which voter center? Is that Marine?
That's the Jocelyn Center.
Jocelyn, okay, gotcha.
And Mahan Heights, I believe, too, correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a lot of frustration with the escalators. Like it or not, we're in the escalator business. I mean, if we do determine a solution, are we a couple of years away from that, or?
Likely, it would have to go through, some preliminary and final design and then plan check before we can move on that.
Okay, is it going to be, I mean, will it keep working, or do we just turn it off entirely?
Currently working right now before I came into this meeting, so that's the as-is state. We have been working with a design firm, and we're anticipating this summer presenting some options, some concept options to the council. And once we get some direction from the council on which way to go, then we will start a real design process and get that project moving.
Okay, great. And then just going to the American Martyr Stormwater Sump, your department did a great job. You averted a disaster there during some of these heavy rains. And then, of course, that brought to bear the fact that it needs, some enhancement with the sump technology. Any idea of a timeline on that, or is it simply in the budget design and budget cycle?
We're going to do a feasibility study to see what could be done. And once we get that information, then we'll come back to the council with some recommendations.
Okay, great. Terrific. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay.
Yeah, and just to add, city manager reminded me, while it is at the American Martyrs area, that's actually a public sump.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So just.
Good point, thank you.
We are not subsidizing
Yes.
the church's sump.
Yeah. Well, it's always good to stay on the good side of Father Monsignor Barry. So.
Okay, Councilmember Shirley.
Thank you. I want to tag on a little bit of what I heard from my colleagues, specifically as to how much we're putting into the reserve of the CIP. Before I continue with my questioning, maybe you can tell us what the reserve is, or maybe Libby can tell us what the reserve is going to be, what portion is going to be set aside from the potential monies that we received.
Sure, give me one moment to get to that. It is identified in the budget document. I don't know if.
I thought it was 500,000, but I could be wrong.
It used to be that, right? Or is it?
No, we never had a reserve prior to MMB.
Okay.
just to give everyone a reference on where to find that information too, it is identified in the 5-year forecast section of the budget document, but I am just getting there right now.
Look at us with our big green. I like the fact that it's green, thank you. I can find it easily.
So yes, in fiscal year '26, it is 500,000, and then fiscal year '27, again, it's 500,000. There were heavier projects that were budgeted in the next 2 years that I think had been kind of on the books and, had been deferred for a while. So with this additional funding, they're now planned for the next few years. But then after that, we were able to enhance the reserve amount. So fiscal year '28, it's $1 million, and then $2 million the following year, and then up to $3 million in the last year of the 5-year forecast.
Got you.
That's great, thank you.
So, thank you for that. A couple of more questions for you. So the 500,000, I want to try to not talk about MMB so much, but of the sales tax measure that we put out, 500,000 is less than 10% of the monies that were going to be coming in from that measure, approximately.
Sorry, can you restate the question?
So the $500,000 we're putting into the CIP for as a committed line item for future debt service and future capital is less than 10% of the total dollar amount coming in from MMB. Is that?
Yeah, I
You
guess it is
asking-
less than 10%
Less
of
than
the
10%
total.
total. So I guess my question is, my concern is that, we're not putting away enough into the reserve, into the CIP reserve for future infrastructure and debt service. That's a comment, but I would propose that, or potentially look at a way that we can put more. I know you're doing that in the latter years, but I would look to, not from MMB, but just from sales tax itself, maybe move, 10% or 15% of the sales tax from the general fund to a committed line item into the CIP, because part of why we did that measure, we all advocated for it. I just can't see just putting away like 8% of the first year of those proceeds into a committed for future debt service and capital. So I would like to see what it would look like if we were to put a recurring amount on a quarterly basis from the general fund to the CIP committed line item for future capital or debt service. So if that makes sense.
Yeah, we would have to do a little research on the impacts to that, and then, if you're looking to see a higher number in the reserve in the immediate next few years, it might be a discussion of the trade-offs you were inquiring about to de-obligate funds, or not allocate funds to certain projects that are currently allocated.
Could I ask you,
Sure.
because I know you're not, I'm not saying be done.
Sure.
But I think what I'm hearing you say, we're still committing the money, though, to capital projects. But you're talking about specifically the reserve of the capital improvement reserve.
Correct. For example, if you take 3 million or 4 million or 5 million, whatever the number is, if you allocate like how much debt service can this purchase, and then that would be X number. So in this particular case, I don't know if we're putting enough money away in a committed line item in the CIP. We're moving the money in there for operation and things that we need, but we're not putting away in a line item other than $500,000
For reserve.
into a reserve. So we
Right.
could, if we wanted to, let's say something happens, we want to do, look at Jocelyn Center, for example. It's going to, let's say it'll be $35-40 million. And that, if we go to that reserve to pay down some of that bond, it would only be $500,000. I'm saying we need to put money into a committed reserve from the sales tax. Not talking about the measure, I'm talking general sales tax.
General sales, okay. So we're going to bifurcate that
because they're two different things, because MMB was a general tax.
Okay, I'll go ahead and finish. I think I understand a little more, and then we can.
Could I add one comment, just so everyone's aware, that the CIP fund expenditures do include over $600,000 in debt service for the 400 Manhattan Beach Boulevard site that is anticipated for next year.
Right, and that was part of
That's
why
great.
we did the measure, so.
Yeah.
To be able to not just use budget dust at the end of the year, have enough funds. That's why that was done. But also, I have one other thing for Libby as well.
Go ahead, and I'd like to add also.
Okay. So other thing I'm concerned about is that we are overstating our surplus in the general fund by including those funds that we're getting from the measure, then we're transferring. I'd like to ask you if there was a way that we can move those over from the general fund to the CIP outside of transferring it, because the transferring is as a mechanism that's done outside of, it's below the line. It's outside of the regular structure. So kind of, can you elaborate on that, or can you talk about why we do the TOT move, general fund, in a regular monthly basis versus the sales tax, or is that something that maybe you can bring back?
Yeah, it's something we could probably bring back, and then unless, I think we also discussed some of the legal questions as we were designing the ballot measure last fall and deciding, is it a general tax versus a special tax? There were discussions then on how to proceed. So we could certainly come back with a full explanation on that. If
Yeah, I
you would like.
appreciate that, but this, I'm talking outside of MMB, I'm talking about sales tax, a sale, from the sales tax in the general fund to the CIP.
Yeah, and it might be an even bigger discussion. As you mentioned, the transfers historically in the city have been done outside of revenues and expenditures. We've talked about for years moving them into the revenue expenditure equation, so that is a bigger discussion that would need to come back
Okay.
at a later date.
And then, okay, Eric Lee wanted, Director Lee wanted to say something.
Thank you. As it relates to your concern about having these a sufficient reserve in the CIP, you know, Mayor, I think maybe that's something for the council to consider. Maybe not as it relates to prioritization of various projects on a line item basis, but if you gave us some direction that rather than having $500,000 in the reserve for fiscal year 27, you'd want to see $1 million, and we could come back with some proposals to, okay, this is how we could trim $500,000 of proposed expenditures, and that might be some direction you could give us.
Yeah, I think that would be, we can include this in the council discussion to give direction and then talk about the other piece as well as a
Okay.
council. Okay? Good points. Did you want to ask others? Are you?
I have two project related,
Let's do
they're
it.
new projects, so they're not on here. Is that the time to discuss, or you want to do that later?
I don't really care. I mean,
They're two little ones.
I don't really care, she said.
The 9/11 memorial at the bottom of one of the pillars has a crack on it that's visible on all four corners of there. And it's filled in, kind of like puttied over, I think just as a Band-Aid. Is that something that we could look at as part of the CIP? I've had several people mention it to me, and I went on there and take a look, and it's just a jagged across, and it's been puttied over.
So the Parks and Rec Department recently presented the RLA study to the council, and I think the 9/11 memorial was in the top of the list. So Director Lehman can add to that.
Great.
Yes, thank you. The RLA contract is being routed here shortly, and one of the art pieces will be the 9/11 memorial. So it should be, the work should be completed, we're looking at sometime this summer.
Oh, great, thank you.
Yeah, and it is public art funds.
Real quick, if you can be up here, tennis courts at Live Oak between 5 and 6 is the only two courts that don't have a door. Like, I think 6 doesn't have a door, so people have to walk through. I've had several people mention to me that they got to walk through 5 to get to 6. Is that something that we can add to the CIP to get a door opening so they can?
A gate.
It's a
A
gate.
gate, yeah, what did I say?
A door gate.
Gate,
Yeah,
a gate.
Opening.
Opening. So they don't have to, so they have to wait and stop, and it's just, people with their tennis are, it's just something that was brought to me. Two little things.
And so I guess on Parks and Rec end, absolutely, I know when that was mentioned, that's something we just took a quick look at. Obviously, this is something we'll need to look at in terms of ADA access and, how we would make that happen, but we have taken an initial look at it.
Okay, thank you.
And that's something, again, everything that we talk about, and I certainly have no problem with either of those things, but I love those questions, and then when we give direction, we should, hey, remember to do this, like, we should do that, so together. Okay, any more questions? Love those. I just wanted to ask, in years past, or maybe it wasn't part of the CIP, we would sort of get a chart or plan that showed the schedule of pavement or repavement, so we could see it by street and see it by, am I misremembering this? Somebody?
There used to be, I think it was aside from the CIP, but
I think it
there was a
aside.
schedule of, the next cycles of street projects we're doing, where we're going to grind overlay, where we're going to do slurry
Yeah.
seal, and how that interacts kind of with some of the other CIP projects.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, again, that's something with, council direction, full council direction, I think would be helpful just to see, because then we can see what areas are being impacted, affected, make sure that everybody's feeling the love. So, but again, we can talk about that all together. Councilmember Lesser.
Director Lee, I wanted to follow up on your response to Councilmember Sherillian with regard to a larger reserve. Because my assumption, if we go from a $500,000 reserve to $1 million reserve, this update on the CIP, it's going to impact projects, is it not?
That is correct. But I think there's a way for us to do that as well. And so, for example, we've earmarked $2 million for the 400 MBB project. Maybe we mark 1.5 for that, and we would be able to increase the reserve. Right now, there's no clear direction on what we're doing with that property, and so maybe not having the full $2 million locked up for that project might make sense. So there's actions like that we could take, or there's specific projects that if they're not as much of a priority as growing the reserve, that's something that we could take that feedback as well.
That's how to do it.
So I'm a little confused. We have less than an hour of this study session, and then this item reappears, kind of like Rip Van Winkle, on our main council agenda, which starts at 6 p.m. How can we give this sort of direction and allow staff to be able to come back and indicate how this might impact future projects, including some big ones which are not yet fully, we know are not funded, but we don't know even how much they cost? How can we give direction tonight is what I'm really going for. And when are you looking for it? Are you looking for it in this study session or tonight? But let me let you answer the first part.
I think from our perspective, if we walk out of here by 11 o'clock, or hopefully earlier with some clear direction to come back at the next meeting, that's what we're looking for. And so using the time this afternoon and this evening
Yeah.
to get to that, I think we're anticipating that you need that time.
Okay. I guess I then ask my colleagues, or maybe I look to the mayor first, because it sounds like you have a little bit of a thought of how you want to use this time that we have left for this workshop versus how we're going to direct staff during our main meeting that's coming up. Do you
Yeah.
have a thought?
Well, I do sort of have a thought. I mean, I have many thoughts, Councilmember Lesser. So I think that, given we do have a little bit of time now, I think if we could talk amongst ourselves and try to come up with, okay, yeah, let's look at that, let's look at this, and then we might do some more of it at the 6 o'clock hour or whenever it shows up. And just so I'm making sure I understand you, staff, they're not going to come back tonight on the agenda and say, oh, this is what we can do, but I think we start discussing it, because we may sit together here and say, I don't want to do this, I might say. And then Nina may say, I want to do this, and Eric may say, we have to do this. So I think it would be helpful to try to do that if it's possible.
I agree. I want to look to the other colleagues as well, but for my opinion
If there's
is, thank you, I support Councilmember Sherillian's objective in raising the question of having a greater reserve. We know there are going to be these large projects expenditures on the horizon, and notwithstanding is sales tax increase, we don't have the funds for it. But I want to better understand what that's going to mean for some of the projects that we have now on our list and what direction we need to provide staff to be able to come up with a larger reserve. So that's what I'm interested in, and I defer to you to give an answer, or I welcome a dialogue among council members.
Yeah, so as I alluded to a few minutes ago, we've earmarked $2 million for 400 MBB. I think there's likely to be a desire to build a much bigger project than a $2 million project that will need debt service to fund. And so if we backed off on that, whether back off $500,000 or even $1 million or even $1.5 million, that could get us to, say, almost $2 million right away without impacting any of the programmatic type proposals we have right now. Conversely, we've got this ADA vote centers project that has just arrived on your CIP out of nowhere. Normally, new projects would start in year 5, but we've got a regulatory need from the county.
That's what I was going to, we have to do it,
Yeah,
right?
if we want to have elections in city facilities in 2026, we need to do this project this next year. And so that's a project we wouldn't want to delay.
See, that's the kind of stuff we need to know. Councilmember Franklin, were you going to ask something? And
Yeah,
I see you.
but didn't we do something with the parking and the crosswalk, or is it something else?
You're talking about the Jocelyn project?
Yeah, the Jocelyn project.
Yeah, that's an enhanced pedestrian safety there, but there's ADA issues at Jocelyn and Manhattan Heights that the county has advised us that we need to take care of before the next election.
Is that why we moved to those churches? And
That is correct. That's why this year they were not at that facility.
Okay, and frankly, we could decide we don't want to do that, which means we wouldn't have the elections here, right? I mean, I'm not saying that's what we should do, but that could be a discussion we could have. Councilwoman Tornay, but then I think we have to open it up technically to public comment, and then we should go at it.
In going through all the items, is there a way for us to know which projects we have to do, or, our regulatory projects versus, because then we can just take those off the list of discussions if we have to do them, right?
So if we want to pull up that slide, we can go through that, I think, in a few minutes.
Let's do it. Let's do that. That's not the schedule. That's not the schedule slide, correct? Or is it?
Correct. I think there's a slide with maybe 30 projects on it for the CIP fund.
Oh, but that's just the CIP fund.
Correct. I think there's the highest degree of discretion there.
Okay, well, so we're, right now, the ones that all right, so actually, I think we should open it up to public first, because then we'll do that per fund, okay? And that'll be but that is the right way to go, okay? So is there anyone in chambers?
Besides staff.
Who's not staff? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone?
No requests on Zoom.
Okay, thank you for allowing me to follow the law. All right, let's look at that CIP fund, which was slide 10, I believe. I believe what the councilwoman has suggested is that, tell us on here what we are mandated, what we have to do, correct?
Yes, so and just to reiterate, the CIP fund is where we have the highest degree of discretion for the council on this. So it's going to be easier for me, Mayor, if I just go 1 through 19. I'll tell you yes or no. So the EV chargers is an elective project that we're doing.
So that's not, I'm just going to say no. Or elective
Not discretion.
option. Okay,
There's no mandate there.
okay.
2, 3, and 4, there's no mandates. Deferred park maintenance, there's no mandates. Sand dune park improvements, no mandates. The pay and play at the sports court at Marine Avenue, no mandate there. Replacing the fence at the Marine Avenue soccer field, not mandated. BEG facility parking, not mandated. Manhattan Village field lighting, not mandated. Renovation of the employee lounge, not mandated. City facility renovations, not mandated. Council chambers renovation, not mandated. Gateway and monument signs, not mandated. Wayfinding program phase 2, not mandated. BEG pool facility upgrades, not mandated. And the Manhattan Village aquatic pool complex, not mandated. And I'll note that we just have earmarked a small amount of money here because we're in discussions with the Bay Club and we don't know what's going to come our way on that side. Um, 18 annual non-motorized transport program, that's not mandated. City-owned refuse enclosure improvements, that's mandated in the long run for us to do.
Before you go on, as you're saying, not mandated, I get, that's what we asked, but are there any, so like, when you talked about beg pool facility upgrades, well, I guess we could go through first and say not, it's optional, but then we should go through and say if there's a safety concern, right? Because that, I do believe with the beg pool facilities, what's been alluded to is that we got to do this. So let's keep going, starting with number 20. Does that make sense, colleagues? Okay. Okay.
So as it relates to the EV chargers at Marine Avenue Park, it's not mandated, but we do have a grant that's paying for part of that. And so we've got some grant requirements on that.
That's a different thing in a way. Okay, so go on with number 20.
School district is not mandated. The solar installation at city facilities, not mandated. Annual facilities capital maintenance, not mandated. City hall elevators modernization, I would argue that's mandated if we want to keep an elevator.
Yes.
Irrigation in the tree wells, not mandated. The electrical feed at the public works yard is going to be mandated by Edison at some point. Mariposa Fitness Station, not mandated. The Heights Park improvements, including the restroom, turf, and rock wall, not mandated. HVAC replacement here at City Hall, not mandated. The painting at Police Fire, not mandated. The Vote Center ADA improvements, mandated. Senior Scout House community renovation, not mandated. Annual citywide security programs, not mandated. Annual street resurfacing program, not mandated. And this is an example of some funds that normally we don't even pay out of the CIP fund, but our costs are increasing. So it's mostly outside funding that pays for those projects. And if we didn't have this CIP portion of those programs, we would just do less street resurfacing. The wooden bridge pedestrian, polywog wooden bridge, that's not mandated. The outdoor dining projects are not mandated. Neither is the 400 MBB project or the slurry seal program.
So, but again,
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mayor. 38 is our obligations with the school district for slurry, and that is mandated by our agreement with the school district.
but again, that doesn't mean these other things are not important. Some of them are incredibly important. And I mean, if there's any that if anybody looks, maybe we should do it this way. Maybe you look at this list and you say, I don't want to do this, and you bring that up. Is that a way to do it? Or you're giving me the look, or you're giving me the look?
I would say maybe instead of not wanting to do, but that, we pick low priority projects because all these
Like
are,
it.
a lot of these are high priority projects, so. but-
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yes.
You go first.
Sure.
I was going to maybe take the opposite, because I felt in going through this summary, hearing what are the high priority items was most helpful.
Yep.
Because all of these are wants.
Right.
Oh, gosh, I shouldn't go down that road. Wants versus needs, where we had that discussion in
Yeah.
the facilities strategic plan. But there are some
Can't
higher
believe you remember
priority
that.
items, which I presume you would like to discuss. So does that potentially mean another pass down this list? I wanted to hear what Councilman
I want to hear what you have to say. I also agree, I want to hear from them. That's where I was going with what's urgent, like, beg pool is urgent, so it's a high priority. And then we can make our kind of, a pass at it. But Councilmember Trillian?
Yeah, I think it was helpful for me, you mentioned the painting at the police department exterior. That's on this list here, but looking at the schedule of capital improvement projects by fund, the schedule, with the dollars on it, that's not till fiscal year 30. So this is
Yeah?
for all 5 years.
Correct.
So I think what would help me is if we had a list with numbers next to them, so we can kind of see the dollars and the year of impact for us to make that decision, because like a police department paint, that's not till, if there is a slide that, I see it on my schedule.
Yeah, I know, it's
There
hard.
it is.
I
see
know,
it
I
on my
keep going back, I know.
But it's also not numbered in the same
No, I get you.
sequence as
Yeah,
the schedule,
I
so
get you.
it's hard to see the dollar value. Something might look little on here, but it might be a large item, and it might not be till 2028. So what, we shouldn't be wasting our time right now talking about something in 2028. Let's focus on the CIP for the first year. What's our projects? How can we get them done? What's a reasonable number of projects that Public Works get done, including the past projects that are already in the CIP?
And I see the city manager wishes to jump in here, but I would also say that it's not just the ones, it's ones that you might start this year that might not get finished for a while, but I know what you're saying. Go ahead, city manager. What?
Alternatively, I was going to suggest if there are any specific projects of concern, the council members should bring those up, just because, staff has invested a lot of time in prioritizing based on resources as well. Resources and funding in terms of fiscal year 26 through 30. And so it might be a good place to start. If there are any projects of concern, we can focus on those.
If something on here, sorry, council member. So if something on here we absolutely don't want to do, and then okay. That's what I said, actually.
I would recommend just a simple ABC. Go down, and A, we want to see it right away. B has some priority, and C, we can just sort of table until, like we saw another fiscal year.
That's an approach too that could work, but I feel like, so in order to get, say, the CIP, this funding source is where you would put Councilmember Cerulean's gateway between 5 and 6 if we wanted to add it, right? So I would suggest we look at these and see if there's anything we want to add and anything we want to find out if it's feasible to hold off on.
To
Not every
Councilmember Franklin's point, what I thought I heard is that some of these items may not be the highest priority, but they're already allocated for a number of years out. So in other words, just going ABC might not capture the fact that they're already planned for almost 5 years out. That's the only reason why I have it.
But I'm just talking about it would be a priority for this year's budget.
There you go.
Additionally, some of these, and Director Lee could correct me if I'm wrong, we're already partway through
Right.
some of the projects,
Yeah.
right? So that's another consideration.
Let me offer this, and then, well, you want to go ahead?
Well, can we go through those? I mean, if we've already started on those, then maybe we don't need the discussions because we're going to need funding to complete it. We don't want projects that are halfway done and then we stop funding them, right?
I mean, that's fair too. We could do that. I mean, I guess I could also look at this and say, listen, I believe in focusing on Senior and Scout Community Center as well. Like, we could also give our top priorities because they may not fully align because maybe there's an urgency in this other thing, but it's going to help them. And so maybe if we could come up with our priorities, because it's not like we're trying to cut things from here because they've identified funding sources for these things. So, but if there's something on this list that's not on here, we want to add it, then we have to have a horse trade, right? So I think, does that make sense?
I just want to give Director Lee maybe one more chance if he wants to go through and indicate some of the more higher priority this coming year or so projects. Am I hearing you correctly that you'd like that opportunity as we're going through these and considering these?
I'd be happy to have that. I think it might provide you with a little more information.
Okay, so we can do that. Okay, let me make a note, though. So let's do that, and then perhaps we'll do CalSci priority, but I also might want to give direction on what to come back with that could help us understand it in layman's terms. But please, give us what you said.
Okay. So the EV chargers, our design is almost complete, and so we wouldn't recommend abandoning that at this point. These next 2 through 5 are really just placeholder items to make sure we continue to reinvest in our parks. Wouldn't recommend dismantling that. Sand Dune Park,
You would not recommend?
I would not recommend defunding any of those 2 through 5. Number 6, Sand Dune Park, we're about ready to embark on design. We've already got direction from the council to do that, so we're moving on that. The sports court at Marine Avenue Park, the pay and play facility, we don't have a proposal yet, or a direction from the council, I should say. But that is a dormant city facility that's being unutilized at this point.
So there's no money being proposed to be spent right now on that?
There are a modest amount of CIP funds and then also Measure A funds
Okay.
for next fiscal year.
That's like 40,000.
40,000.
I'm sorry,
Appropriated
there's no
already.
additional funds. It's 40,000 of prior year appropriations. The fencing at Marine Avenue Park, that, we haven't started on that, but that certainly is in need of replacement. The BEG facility parking lot, I believe that is programmed in the out years of the CIP. That parking lot is in very poor condition. However, given the uncertainty of what the cities and districts' investment at the BEG pool facility, we have not, it's not programmed for the next couple years. The Manhattan Village field lighting replacement, I would say is an urgent need that we need to do at the beginning of July if we can. Renovation of the City Hall Employee Lounge, that's something that would certainly enhance the facility here in City Hall. Same with, we've got a large amount over many years for city facility renovations, and having funds available to do some type of city facility projects would be important. And we're already in process on our warehouse at the yard and trying to secure some IT infrastructure. And so we definitely have projects moving already there. The council chambers renovations, that certainly could be placed on hold by the council. The gateway and monument sign replacement, this is really just entering into another phase of our wayfinding, and that could be delayed. Wayfinding phase 2 similarly could be delayed. No active works going on that right now. BEG pool facility upgrades, I would say that this is urgent and we should not defund that. The Village Aquatic Pool Complex, we have just a small amount of money there. I think it's $50,000. I would say that if we want to continue conversations with the Bay Club, we're going to need some money for something at some point. Annual non-motorized transport program. This is annual funding that we do a lot of miscellaneous projects with, and I would not recommend defunding that. Our city-owned refuse enclosure improvements, these are in the out years of the CIP, and we need to take care of those. School district project we've already talked about. The solar power installation at city facilities, are not actively working on that now. Annual facilities capital maintenance program, I would say we definitely need funds to do annual repairs there. Our elevators, I mentioned, this is an urgent project. Irrigation for the tree wells in North Manhattan Beach, we're currently working on a design for that, and we can come back to the council on whether we want to actually spend the funds to do that once we have better costs.
How are they being ordered now? By hand?
Yes.
Yep, okay.
The electrical feed to the yard, Edison's going to require us to do that sooner than later. The Mariposa Fitness Station, that certainly could be delayed, although there's strong community interest in that. Manhattan Heights Park improvements, we are nearing the end of design on that, and so I would encourage us not to deviate from that. The HVAC replacement here at City Hall, we've got work that needs to continue, and I would say keep that. The police fire facility, as Councilor Cerulean mentioned, that is programmed for year 5, and so that is something that does not have to be done right now. We talked about the vote center already and the scout center. Citywide security cameras. If council recall, we had millions and millions of dollars programmed in the last CIP year after year for this, and we've already postponed a lot of that funding and reduced funding there to accommodate some of these other priorities. And so the amounts that we have here are programmed in years 3, 4, and 5 at a much reduced level already. And if the council wanted to continue to deprioritize that, there's no active work that's happening that would be intercepted. The pedestrian bridge at Polywog Park, I think needs to happen at some point. The outdoor dining projects are responsibility to the council direction to be added here. We've talked about 400 MBB, and then the biennial slurry, that's something we are required to do with the district.
So, okay. Oops, sorry. I would think that, it would be helpful and to come back with a list. Tell me if I'm wrong. I think it's helpful for us to make the decisions. If it's a list and it's you can do it by fund. Well, I don't even know if it should be by fund, but it should be, what are the highest priority projects for the Public Works Department, no matter who's paying for it? And the total dollar amount and the total per year, right? So that, and the status, started, not started, whatever. Because I think that, and maybe am I off base here? I mean, I feel like you're proving that it's funded, and that's great, right? So I'm not concerned about the funding, but if we, to the extent that we can somehow make any changes or additions, it's kind of hard to decide where and when we can do that. I don't know. I feel like I would understand it better if I saw it that way, but my colleagues are going to weigh in here and let me know if that's helpful or not. Councilwoman Tarnay.
Oh, no.
I thought that was for Councilmember Trillian.
Sorry.
I guess for me, it would be along the terms that the mayor was indicating, that let's take one bite at a time. Let's take 1 year at a time. I appreciate this is the entire 5-year CIP, but, and that's what we're looking to approve, but I'd like to see what the priorities are in 2026, as the mayor indicated, within each fund, that what's priority. I'm not so concerned about the other funds, because you have specific uses for those funds coming in and you're utilizing them to the full capacity. Great job on that. I'm just more concerned about the CIP, because that's where we're able to make the most impact, per se, on different things outside of just roads and highways.
I guess that's correct. It's really about the CIP because that's where we have the most discretion. That's what you said. Thank you. So don't do it every fund. Got it. Okay.
Yeah. And then for me, I guess, did we open a public hearing?
Yeah, we did.
So when should we start the dialogue
Now.
about specific projects? I appreciate what you mentioned, kind of potentially increasing the reserve with the project at 400 MBB. I mean, personally, I'd like to see at least $1.5 million in that reserve this first year, if not more.
Well, that would be
Oh.
something we decide
Okay.
together, right? Like that's a big change.
And then can we talk a little bit about the renovations? Says City Council renovations. You indicated what this was for, but it's $2.7 million with the prior year appropriation. I just want to make sure that that money's being well spent and something that's going to last a long time, and where it is, what it is, and
Which ones?
Which project was that?
So it's the City Hall renovations.
Oh.
If everybody goes to their schedule, I'm on, so you can see the dollar figures. I'm talking to my colleagues. It's line number 15. That way you can see
On
what
page
was.
142. Right?
Yeah. Well, it says,
Well,
yeah.
So I'm showing that we've got 808,000 in prior year appropriations plus another 1.85 this next fiscal year.
So you got
and then-
$2.7 million. What are you going to do with that?
So the priority is to address what we're doing at the warehouse right now at the Public Works Yard. And so we've got escalating costs that we're potentially facing there. There's also renovations in the horseshoe to make that area more functional. And so, we think this, the nearly $2.7 million is, we're definitely going to need funds like that to continue to renovate our existing space.
I get the horseshoe, but I guess I'm concerned what we're doing at the warehouse that is costing this much money.
There's some environmental issues that we're trying to resolve with network switchgear there, and also with our purchasing office, and going through the design process and complying with ADA.
Okay.
It's proving to we're chasing a bigger project right now than we originally anticipated.
I appreciate it. One last quick question. Line item number 14, which is the renovation of the City Hall Employee Lounge. Got that in fiscal year 28. Can I get your opinion on what impacts it would have if we moved it to fiscal year 26 this year? Because I feel like that can's been kicked down the road for many years, and it'd be nice for the employees to have somewhere they can utilize. They're our employees, they should have somewhere nice to utilize.
We definitely could do that. There would be a trade-off in some of these other projects, potentially like 400 MBB like we discussed, that could offset that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Franklin.
Yes, so as we were going through, I just employed my own recommended record keeping, and I just gave it an A, B, or C.
Okay.
So actually, if this was a spreadsheet in front of me, I would have put in another column, put A, B, or C, and then I would sort it, and I'd get my A's, I'd get my B's, and I'd get my C's. So, failing that, I think the A's speak for themselves, all right? We need to get those. Do we have an idea, I mean, from that schedule of improvement projects by fund and the CIP fund, I mean, can we get a quick total for fiscal year 2026? Can we go through and?
It's $7.267 million in '26.
Yeah, so we're talking about funding the CIP fund with total of 1.5?
Yeah, so, I mean, for sake of argument, for the reserve that's been discussed, if we wanted to add 1.5 million more to make that a $2 million reserve,
Okay,
we could reduce that, the 400 MBB line item by 1.5 million, and that would immediately free up another 1.5 for that reserve.
right, okay. So, let me just see here. Well, I'm going to have to spend a little more time. I got to go back
Yeah,
to
I
that
know, right?
schedule and bring those numbers forward, and if I had it electronically, it could help, but I'll pass for right now. and come
Okay.
back.
Well, and before I turn to you, Councilmember Lesser, I'd like to encourage us to have the dialogue again a little bit later so we can see if, there's 3 votes or 4 votes or 5 with the direction for some of these things. There's not many changes, but just for a few of them, I think I want that, we could do that then, because this is a workshop, we don't usually give the direction, but is that what you were going to say?
That's exactly where I was going to go. I was going to
Wow.
ask where, following up on your comments, Mayor, is where we want to leave this, maybe in just a few minutes, so there's a little bit of a break before we begin our actual meeting. And that is, what direction do we want to offer staff if we want to give them some direction before the item comes back later this evening, versus are we just teeing this up for a discussion during our regular meeting, following what I thought I heard the city manager said, to come back at a future meeting? What is it, maybe I ask that as a question to the city manager. What are you looking for?
We can get direction right now. We've done that in study sessions in the past. Or if you want to hold off your direction for the 6 o'clock meeting, you're welcome to do that as well. But depending on what that direction is, we're likely going to have to come back to the next meeting with those changes or considerations to present to you.
To go back a step of what had been previously recommended, if there's interest among the council majority, which I think there is, to have more reserves in our CIP budget, would it be more helpful to simply say to staff, help us see how there's a greater reserve coming up in the next 2 to 3 fiscal years? Because I think that was a concern
Right.
of Councilmember Cerulean, as opposed to just putting things at the end of our 5-year plan. Or do you want this level of specificity that we're kind of noodling at, each of us in our remarks, as to what our priorities are?
I think if we have the general direction to increase that reserve for this fiscal year and potentially upcoming fiscal years, if you take a look at what we've already projected in the forecast, then we'll work on the CIP and the budget to revise that and bring that back in that
Right.
way. I think it would be helpful to understand if there's concurrence that where we should take that money from is the 400 MBB.
The right
And that way we're not disturbing any of the other projects.
I have one question on that, and that is it not going to take some time to go through the community input process anyway? So in other words, might the delay in allocating those funds be realistic anyway? Because I think it's going to take some time for our community to fully discuss beyond the upcoming community meeting as to how we might want to program this and what are the potential costs and our options?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. That's it for now.
I appreciate the question. So I think, so I think there is concurrence that we'd like to understand what it would be like to put more money into the CIP reserve, correct? I think there's concurrence on that. So that would be direction. We can, again, say that again tonight for the public because this is on the agenda, right? And he's going to present this again, I think. So is there anything else we want to try to give concurrence on before we do take a little bit of a break? So,
Mayor, respectfully, if you don't want a presentation tonight, we can take direction here and come back. So it's up to the council.
Let's have a public.
I feel like the public deserves, I feel like they have to have at least something, don't you? Doesn't
I
everybody?
do, because
Yeah.
we've now had this work session, and some members of the public have trickled in, but the expectation is there would be a discussion at our regular meeting, so I think it would be helpful.
We won't belabor it as much as we are, I'm guessing.
Speak for yourself.
I am speaking for myself, but I do think it's incumbent upon us to present the plan to the public.
And I think that sounds great. I think that we would appreciate some finite targets as possible as it relates to if you wanted to grow that reserve to a certain level. And that way we can really do the math behind the scenes.
My request of staff would be to frame those questions after you've completed the presentation.
Yes.
You're looking for a reserve level so that you can better evaluate the other programs from which you would need to take revenues, right? Or expenditure funds. Yeah.
Do you want that, are you
Tonight.
asking for that now or later?
Later.
We can get it tonight.
Tonight, okay.
I just wanted one point of clarification. If we chose to do the $2 million and took $1.5 million from line item 40, which is the project 400, it still leaves about $500,000, at least $215,000 from prior year appropriation, and it'll leave about almost $300,000 for fiscal year 20. So there'll still be a line item with about $500,000.
Appreciate that, yeah.
But it's having the reserve, it's something very important that we need to do and we should do.
I think that, it sounds like I agree with you. I mean, what you're saying makes sense to me. What I would want is both the finance department and Public Works to say, this is what the benefit would be to having that. I believe you, but here's the benefit. There would be a benefit to this, and I believe now we can take it from this line item. I think this is all good, but that would be the thing I'd want to see when you come back. So, thank you. If there's no further, are there any other comments or questions from my colleagues? So if there's not, I want to adjourn to the meeting that starts in 18 minutes so that we can, take a break. Sound good?
And
Yes.
so Mayor, you just have to adjourn this meeting.
Okay, so that's what I just did. I adjourned this meeting.